Hey cats, what's happening? Thanks for joining me on this Thursday, November 13th. This might be a little difficult video for me to get through, but I'll do my best. Today marks the 4 years since the passing of my dear wife. And I don't celebrate the day, but I honor her on this day. And I will do that by, putting this video forth and kind of, representing her the best I can. Back when I first met her, I never had any inkling at all that one day she would be my wife. I had no physical attraction to her. She was simply a friend, and that's kind of where it stood. But way back then, about probably 20 years or more ago, I was going through a difficult divorce. And at the same time, so was she. We were both in somewhat dysfunctional marriages. And I don't know if I'm sure some of you have been through a divorce. Some of them, end amicably, where the parties both agree peacefully to end things and move on to their own ways. Some people continue to get along well together even though they're divorced. But in other situations, it's very ugly. Divorce it not only affects the person involved, like it just didn't affect me, it affected the whole family. Not just my family, but her family too. It just rips things in half. For years, her family was part of my family, and now it was divided. So I no longer have contact with any of those people that I pretty much grew up with. But anyway, that it was just an awful time for me. One of the lowest points in my life, one of them. But I managed to survive. And during that process, though, I had met V. And she confided in me after some time. We were friends for a while. She confided in me that she was wanting to get a divorce, that she was really having some major issues at home and was very unhappy. She asked me to help her. And I was a little reluctant at first, but she said she had nobody really that she knew that she could ask. And I was the only one that she felt comfortable, So I said, all right. So, I helped her out. I found her an apartment, a duplex apartment that I helped move her into in town, where she had a place of her own and she was comfortable there. She was very happy there. So, as the time went on, she would request help from me. She needed me to help paint the bathroom or hang some curtain rods because I had tools, she had nothing. So I'd go over there and, do the little things that she needed done. And our friendship continued to grow. She began inviting me over there for dinners and such, which, I was here by myself and, kind of struggling on my own. So it was nice to be able to share a meal with somebody. And, it just felt good to have each other's back. I had hers, she had mine. And our friendship continued to grow stronger and stronger. I remember I was over there making a repair the one day, and it was in the evening after work. I went over there after work, and I don't remember what I did, but I had my toolbox with me. And I said goodbye, and I went to leave, and I started out across the little parking lot there to my truck. And I I realized I had left my toolbox sitting in the kitchen. So I turned around and I went back, knocked on the door, and I said, I forgot my toolbox. I said, I got to grab my toolbox. So I grabbed my toolbox and I started heading out the door, and she said, wait a minute. And I said, what, And I think that was the first time that, she hugged me and gave me a kiss and told me she didn't really want me to leave. And that was a very special moment for me, because at that point I realized that there was something more than just a friendship going on there. And, after that point, time went on, and eventually I told her, I said, rather than paying rent on your apartment, why don't you just move in here? I got this big house. My divorce was final, so I was just here by myself. I said, you might as well move in here with me, which she did with bells on. She was very happy to move in here with me. And that was the beginning of our wonderful life together. One of the first things we did together was take a trip to Cancun. We stayed at a really cool resort there and had just the best time. It was fun. It was relaxing. It was what we both needed, just some time to chill out and get away from everything. And that we did. She was very, very helpful. At the time, I was struggling to keep this house. I had to come up with a mortgage that I couldn't afford. And she was very initial in helping me to find a guy, and I don't know, a broker or whatever you call him, I don't know. But he was able to get us a very low interest loan that just fit right into my budget. I couldn't believe it. I mean, it was one of the coolest things that just really made life a little easier for us. Given the situation, I really had nothing here. I had very little furniture, if any at all. We didn't have a garage, appliances. So right away, she, being the woman, was very helpful in replenishing those things and getting the place back where it was livable again. It was her idea to get us a garage. Back then we didn't have a garage. She told me she would use some of her settlement to build us a pole barn garage. And she said, I don't just want a shed. I want something that's going to keep both of our vehicles and then some. So, and I want you to make sure you have enough room for a shop there too. So we ended up building a 3.5 car garage, which has been a godsend. I mean, that place has been my little man cave for a long time, and a shop, a good place where we can keep the motorcycles and the vehicles safe. As our relationship grew, we realized that we were very, very compatible with each other. We liked the same things. She liked the motorcycles. She liked adventure. She liked hiking. We both loved cooking together and coming up with new concoctions, new recipes all the time. When she first moved in here, she had told me, she said she wasn't too fond of moving out into the country because she was a city girl. She had always been born and raised in the city. But it didn't take her long at all before she said, I'll never move back to the city again. She said, I absolutely love it here. And that warmed my heart to know that. Not only that, but she really took up nature, and she knew all the birds that would come to our feeder in the back, and she was really into the gardening, keeping the garden in tip-top shape, pulling weeds, taking care. She loved mowing the lawn. She loved getting on the tractor and just whipping around the yard. Although, as I said, she never, I grew up my career mowing, and I was taught there were certain ways you mowed, certain patterns, certain things you did and you didn't do. You always blew the grass away from a building. You never blew grass into a driveway or the street. You never blew the grass into a landscape bed. You always planned ahead of time to make your approach, that you did a nice, neat job. Uh, when she mowed, she just was willy-nilly. She didn't seem to have any care about where the grass went, but as long as the yard was mowed, and she always had a big grin on her face while she was out there riding that tractor. She loved that. She was really good about coming up with things for us to do, too. I mean, we were not idle people. We didn't sit around. We were always hiking, and almost every day we'd go out hiking, and we found like a different trail every time. So we'd research and see, okay, well, here's a trail over here at this park we haven't hiked yet. Let's go try that. And so we pretty much had made the rounds all over the place, and we weren't afraid to travel either. She was always finding, other things for us to do, like museums we would go to. We went to an air museum. We went to the art museum. We were always finding things to do, and we loved going down to Amish country too. And each time we went down there, we'd explore something a little different. So there was a lot of variety, and we were always staying busy, always finding things to do. Valerie had a very loving spirit and a very soft heart. She loved holding hands and walking together. She was always telling me how much she loved me, how much she appreciated me. She respected me. And I reciprocated in return. I had a great respect for her, trust in her. And our love just grew like something I never expected. And it was just a wonderful relationship all the way around. I felt like it was the best thing that ever happened to me. If you've ever read in the Bible about the virtues of a woman, she pretty much, met all the marks there. I couldn't have asked for a better lady in my life. Her nickname for me was always boyfriend, and she'd say, "Boyfriend, why didn't we meet when we were teenagers? Because we could have had such a beautiful life together." We did spend a lot of time on the motorcycle together. She loved riding on the back with me, and we rode all over the place. We went to, different rallies and things like that, different events. But we also went out to Sturgis and spent a week out there. We took a trip, not with the motorcycle, but we took a vacation to the Adirondacks. Those are just wonderful times of exploration and adventure. We went down to the Smoky Mountains, and then camping. She loved to camp, which surprised me. And when we first started out, we were sleeping in a tent. And she was fine with that, but eventually we ended up going to the RV show in Cleveland, the big RV show. And after walking through 300 RV trailers, we finally decided on the Hemi, and we went ahead and bought it. That Hemi was her pride and joy. She loved that thing, and she loved going camping in it. I called it glamping because it was more than camping. It was like taking a cottage or an apartment with you. It had all the bells and whistles that you could ask for. And that's what she liked. And she kept, the inside in perfect condition, always sweeping the floor, cleaning up, wiping everything down. And took a lot of pride in that unit. But we traveled to almost every state park in Ohio and tried camping at each one. Some we really liked, some we didn't like, but we still, had so much fun together doing those kind of things. It was so special for me to have a woman like that, like I said, was compatible and loved doing the same things I did. I think we lived here together for at least 5 or 6 years, maybe more, before we decided to get married. You know how after you go through a divorce, you're not really eager to jump straight right back into another marriage. You kind of have cold feet, I guess. It's kind of like once burned, twice shy. or whatever the saying is. And but after that point, we sat down, we talked about it, and we weighed out the pros and cons, and we said, you know what? We're going to be better off if we get married. And that's what we did. And we never regretted it one bit. Then that day came where she started having a lot of pain in her ribs. And she thought she had fractured a rib somehow, and she didn't know how she did it or when it happened. It just was really bothering her. After a series of tests that went through, it was finally diagnosed that she had cancer in her bones. And after more testing, it was realized that she had small cell lung cancer, which is notably a killer. We were devastated, but we thought, well, we're going to do everything we can to fight this. And right away we found one of the best oncologists around who just happened to be in our city here. So we were able to start seeing him, and he promised us that he would do everything in his power to take care of this and nip it in the bud before it got too advanced. Now, how did she get small cell lung cancer? Well, she smoked cigarettes for years and years and years. In fact, when I first met her, she was smoking cigarettes. But she went through a cessation clinic and was able to quit and get off the nicotine. And once she quit smoking, she absolutely abhorred and hated it. And she was just, couldn't even stand to smell secondhand smoke anymore, which is usually the case when somebody's smoked all their life and they give it up. You don't want nothing to do with it anymore. And now the fact was that it came back to haunt her because it gave her the small cell lung cancer. Well, during that time, for 4 years, I watched her digress. It was just a slow, miserable situation. I stayed by her side through everything, though. I went to every appointment, every chemotherapy. Eventually, it ended up with surgeries. She had to have part of a lung removed. She had to have numerous intestinal surgeries to remove sections of her intestine. She suffered. She was strong as an ox, though, and she always kept going with a great attitude. And we had hope. We never gave up hope. But as the years ticked by, we continually got bad news over and over again. They'd say, well, now we found a tumor here, and here's what we're going to do. Here's the plan, and we're going to get rid of it. And they'd do the procedure, and they'd get rid of it, and they'd say, okay, now you're fine. You've got no cancer in your body. But then it would pop up again somewhere else. And that's the thing, when it's in your bloodstream, you don't ever get rid of it. It just keeps coming back. And as the years went by, it just kept coming on more and more and robbing her of her quality of life. We were walking on the trail, and she kept bumping into me all the time. And I said, why are you bumping into me all the time? And kind of listing to the left constantly. And she said, I don't know. Well, it turned out she had a tumor in her brain, in her right brain, which was causing everything to, fail on the left side of her body. So when we were walking, she'd constantly drift to the left. And that was just another, bad hit that we had, which ended up in brain surgery. That was awful. It was an awful, terrible, terrible time. After the brain surgery, she was never able to be the same again. She, had no more hair from all the treatments that she had gone through. So she had a collection of different wigs that she would wear, just so she could look normal. But it got to the point where I had to help her eat. I had to help her, use the bathroom. I had to bathe her. I had to help her in and out of the car, up and down the stairs. Whatever we did, I was there as a part of her, actually. I had to be there for her. And I got her everything she ever needed to make life more comfortable for her. We started out with a walker, but we ended up getting her a wheelchair, and we had to move furniture around, so there was room for her to negotiate around. And it got to the point where she couldn't even move herself in the wheelchair anymore because she couldn't use her left hand. She could only use her right hand, which would just cause her to keep going around in circles, the poor girl. I had to go out one day, and she was in no place to go anywhere. And she was sitting over here in her chair. And I said, I'm going to be back in 1 hour. So I got her everything she needed. I got her coffee, her drink, a snack. I made sure she had gone to the restroom and pottied her, and then got her back in her chair. And so I left. I was gone for just a little bit over an hour. And when I came back home, she was on the floor here. She tried to get out of her chair and get into the wheelchair. For some reason, she was, hell-bent on doing something. She had to get something, and she couldn't wait for me. And she ended up on the floor, and she could not get back up again. She couldn't get back up into her chair. She couldn't get back up into her wheelchair. And I walked in the door, and I was like, oh, my gosh, Valerie, what are you doing? And she just laughed. She said, I was trying to get in my wheelchair, and I fell down on the floor, and I couldn't get back up again. And I said, well, how long have you been there? About 20 minutes she had been laying there on the floor. And those situations continued. She was I put her in the bathtub one day on the bath bench. I left her there. She said, I'm fine. I'm just going to shower myself off, and then I'll call you when I'm done, and you can help me get dried off and get out of the bathtub. And I said, all right. So, and I would help her, like, wash her back or whatever, and then she could, like, wash her own hair and stuff like that. Well, I guess she tried to stand up in the bathtub, and she fell out of the bathtub, tore the whole shower curtain rod down with the shower curtain, ended up on the floor in a tangled up mess, and her foot had hit the faucet on the way out and cut a big gash in her leg. Blood was all over the place. The shower was spraying water up in the air all over the whole bathroom, all over the vanity and the mirror and everything. So I ran in, I heard this big crash, and I ran in there, and I was like, oh my gosh, what are you doing? And I turned the water off right away. I had to get pressure on the wound because there was blood all over the place. It was just a horrible mess. And I was able to get her cleaned up, dried off, and doctored up her wound. She didn't want to go to the hospital. She wanted to go to the doctor. I ended up putting like a butterfly bandage across the gash that, kind of held it together so it could heal up. And then I wrapped it real good with gauze. And it healed up pretty well. But it got to the point where, if she had to get up at night to pee, it would take us at least 20 minutes because I'd have to get her up out of bed. I'd get her in her walker, but I had to have a belt around her because I had to hold her up with the belt and help her to walk to get her to the toilet, and then help her sit on the toilet, and then help her clean up after the toilet, and then get her back in bed. Sometimes it took like up to 30 minutes in the middle of the night just to get her to use the toilet and back. But then she started having seizures. And when she would have a seizure, I'd have to call the 911 because I couldn't, I was really, really scared because her eyes would roll back in her head and her legs and her arms were just, thrashing uncontrollably. And I really feared that I was going to lose her. And the squad would show up, and they'd put her on a gurney, and they'd take her to the hospital. And then it got to the point where the nurse said, you cannot take care of her at home anymore. She's beyond that now. You're taking too much of a risk, and you're not set up to take care of somebody in her condition anymore. So they recommended that I put her in a facility. The first facility that we went to, after the second day, I took her out of there because she just wasn't getting the care she needed. And I went back to our nursing associate, the one who was kind of in charge of her case, and I said, I need to get her in a place like a 5-star. And I said, I don't care if I have to travel, 2 hours to get there to see her every day. I want her to get the best care possible. And so they were able to find a place up in Berea where she went that was right across the street from the hospital as well. And she was getting the best care there. And whenever there was any kind of an emergency situation, she was transferred right across the street into the hospital. And that was a hospital there was top notch. Usually where she was kept there, it was almost like a hotel suite. Very nice, and the care there was just beyond, just wonderful. At that point, though, I was, having to travel every day to see her, but I still had to come home and take care of the cats and, whatever chores I needed to do to maintain the home. So it was a lot of running back and forth every day. I remember the last day that I saw her alive, she was incoherent. She was just staring blankly out the window. She had her head turned to the side like this, and her eyes were just kind of glazed looking out the window as if she was looking at something, and she couldn't move her head or her eyes to respond to me. She didn't even have the strength to squeeze my hand. But when I told her that I loved her, she did make a little noise. That was all she could do. And I knew what she was saying without, really hearing any verbiage. I knew that she was responding back to me. I stayed till that evening, and then I said, sweetheart, I have to go home and feed the kitties and clean the litter boxes and take care of things at home, but I'll be back first thing in the morning. I got up at 6 o'clock that next morning and was getting myself dressed. At 6:30, my phone rang, and I just kind of knew what it was. And when I answered the phone, it was the nurse, and she said, Mr. Avery, I'm just so sorry to tell you that your wife passed away during the night. I can't tell you how that felt. That moment, when I knew that she was gone. Even though I knew that her days were numbered. And I knew that her time was limited. But like I said, we never ever gave up hope, and I never gave up hope to the last minute. And when they finally told me that she was gone, it just felt like I had stepped in front of a freight train. It hit me so hard, and it was so difficult for me. It just left this gaping hole in my heart that I lost the best thing ever that ever happened to me here in this world. And to this day, 4 years to this day, I still have that hole in my heart. I still miss that girl. And I know that I'll see her again one day, and I know that she's in a better place. As far as our relationship goes in that eternity, when that day comes when we all go to see Jesus, I'm told that it'll be a love beyond measure. Won't even compare to the love that we've had here, that we've experienced here on this earth, because everything there will be love. And it'll make the relationships that we held here dear to us on earth seem trivial at that point. I can't imagine being in such a place, but I know that I'll be there one day. I know that I'll be there with her and those that have passed before her. with my mom and dad and those loved ones, and even people that I've never even met before, figures from ancient history that we will be there, that we will be able to meet and know, and all share the same amount of love that is uncomprehendable to us. We can't even understand that level. That's my belief. The other day I was in town there, and this guy cut me off with his Ford Ranger pickup truck. And I couldn't help but notice on the back of his truck, first of all, on the back window of his truck, he had this decal, and it was the face of a devil, like a grinning devil with the horns and everything. And then plastered across the back of his truck were all like satanic type decals and bumper stickers. And I just couldn't help but think, why, knowing what we know about hell, that it's eternal torment, why anybody would want to embellish that. Why anybody would want to worship that notion. Because it's a horrible, horrible, horrible thing. I mean, to think, just to think for a minute, experience the pain that you have with it if you've ever had a kidney stone or you've ever experienced childbirth. It's a pain that is almost unbearable. Horrible, horrible pain. Well, when you know what hell is, you can intensify that a million times. Why would anybody want to subject themselves to that? How does it feel, when you burn your hand on something with a 3rd-degree burn? You grab hold of a hot pan or something and the pain just throbbing. Imagine being in eternal fire for the rest of your life. For eternity. Eternity, eternity never ends. So why would you even play around with that notion? I don't know. I don't understand people. I think it's much easier to look towards Jesus and see his light and his love and know that there's going to be a wonderful, wonderful reward in the end. That to me is the treasure. And I'm looking forward to that. I'll end this video with one of Valerie's, famous sayings, "Hello, beautiful people." And the funny thing was, she would often tell me, "I hate people." She had been burned and hurt in her life by family, by friends, and those left some scars in her life. And whenever anybody ever crossed her, she'd say, "Ugh, I hate people." But she loved you guys, and she made that known. With that, I'll leave you guys with this.
Hey, beautiful people. Long time no see.